Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. I've spent a lifetime performing and producing and doing. Now I'm seeking how to be, how to find peace and fulfillment and my full potential as a human. So I investigate and contemplate and educate on human potential, and I share it here. I don't want mere happiness at this point. I want to find true joy, peace, and fulfillment in every day. In this episode, have art and self-expression in your work and manifest your mission. And a call out to the Outer Banks fans. That's a Netflix series that's just gone wild. My guest here is in the new season 4. Just a name drop and grab your attention. One of my daughters is a fan of Outer Banks and wanted me to watch it with her, which I have. It's been special to do that together. So the fact that I had someone on my podcast that's actually in Outer Banks, well, my dad cred went way up, as you can imagine. So my guest is Brianna Brown Keen. And I'm actually reposting a show I did with her previously because the topic of art in your work and manifesting, it keeps repeating itself in my life. Brianna actually has a new podcast called Manifesting Your Mission. And this week I was a guest on that show. So while Brianna is a successful Hollywood actress, for years now, she's been using her platform to help people define their goals and bring their art and self-expression into all they do, whether they're going into acting in Hollywood where she is, or they're an entrepreneur doing any variety of things. She realizes the power and the dangers of self-expression and dealing with both rejection and acclaim, which is, of course, the secret sauce of Hollywood. And she's known the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I see the most successful people that I know in life overall being people who have gotten clear on who and how they are, and they bring their full self-expression into all facets of life, authenticity, if you will. And I find it beautiful and continue striving for more of that authenticity in my own life, even what I do here. I'd encourage you to search for Manifesting Your Mission, the podcast with Brianna Brown Keen. Check it out in whatever podcast platform you listen. Hey, this is episode number 1481. We've now had over 70 million downloads. If you're new to the show, hey, thanks for being here. I'm so glad you found us. And thanks for listening to our advertisers. That's what helps us put out 5 episodes per week for free. And I work as a peak potential guide. You can see what I do and see if you want to check out working with me at kevinmiller.co. All right, so drive with me and actress and thought leader Brianna Brown Keen to talk about having art and self-expression in your work, manifesting your mission. Let's see what we can learn about ourselves today. So after talking with you the other day, I'm curious about your last 2 Instagram posts. Okay, you ready? Yeah, I'm going to call you out on your own post. No, I want to question the spirit behind it. Actually, like where did these, because I know with my own, it's so often something that's just on my heart right now. It's on my mind. It's something I got passionate about or something that's frustrating me. So I'm going to read them. Okay. This is your last one. You can be rich and buy designer things, but you can't buy class. Those qualities you have to earn. Okay, a couple before that then was just because someone claims to be an expert online doesn't mean they embody that information within their real life too. The only way to truly lead is to lead by example. Both of those are speaking to me of kind of a spirit of authenticity, which I know, again, as we talked the other day, you're kind of in an area of exaggerated, sometimes not, and then getting to see the real person. Yeah. Where were you feeling? What was the feels behind those posts?
Well, okay. So I'm big on quotes. If you,
I know that's how we connected. Thank you for using one of mine.
I know I posted yours. And within my guidebook, Manifesting Your Mission, I have lots of quotes. I love quotes. I've always loved quotes. I feel like it's such a great way to encapsulate wisdom and to brew on a different way of thinking. And recently someone said, I want to see more quotes from you, because you're so great. And I was like, all right, I'll put some of my own, more of my own quotes out. And so in the moment that I wrote the one about, that you can buy designer things, but you can't buy class, integrity, and respect. Mm-hmm. And, there was someone in my life who can buy all the things, but still has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And, that person's actually not in my life at this point, but it was just kind of like, I feel like in our culture, we often put on a pedestal reality stars and, people that are very dysfunctional, the housewives of whatever. Yeah. And while that can be super entertaining, it's normalizing dysfunction oftentimes. So, I have an issue with what is being promoted, what microphone is being handed out. And I actually, when I was a few years ago, I spoke at Twitter in a panel about a digital footprint for children. And the thing that I saw with all these experts throughout the day was they kept emphasizing we need to get basically influencers to change how they go about doing it. And I went on the panel that I was on and I said, I'm in the industry. That's not how it works. These people are going with whatever works to get them more work. So they're more entrenched in the cycle than the normal person. So I said, actually, what has to happen is parents need to educate their children that this isn't healthy or this is dysfunctional or this is titillating and this is why this person's doing it because they're trying to get ahead. So that we have to have discernment as to who we are choosing to be a leader or an influencer and not just going with whoever has a publicist who's pumping them out because they're getting paid a mortgage payment a month. So I know the insides of that. And so I just see it and I see how it's bleeding into our culture. Mm-hmm. And with some of the women that I've mentored and working with who were formerly homeless and now they're not, one of the things I said is just because something's been normalized doesn't mean it's not still dysfunctional. And so that was what was resonating with me at that time.
Yeah. I want to keep playing in those waters because, even in I'm going to say my industry of personal development, self-help, and I struggle with my own industry. I struggle with some of the flavor I'm a part of, which is, hey, I've arrived. I've got these things figured out. I'm going to tell you how to live your life. Totally. And I struggle that you hopefully to have a stage, you have some area of expertise. These authors and all the books behind me have something. Doesn't mean that they have all of life figured out and it's footloose and fancy free from that point on. And so I struggle sometimes with, again, the industry I'm a part of. So here you are as an actress and talk about normalizing dysfunction. I mean, you're part of the media. You're part of, so we're going to say you're part of the problem, and yet you're in it, addressing it as well. Does that sometimes, are you just comfortable leveraging that? Or is it sometimes kind of a tension of your own to deal with that?
I think like any journey or whenever you choose to go into any industry, you have ideal visions of what it is. And then you go in and you see the realities of what it is, right? So when I started doing theater and doing musicals, you're just like performing and it's beautiful and you love the art of performing and moving people and having people emote and relate to other people's experiences. And so that's why I began. And then when I came out to Los Angeles at 19, I had really great opportunities and then some not so great opportunities. And I saw how so much of what was available to me at that time was not necessarily things that was elevated, right? Okay. Some of it, at least what I was getting opportunities to do. And so I had a real like push and pull in that. Like, am I contributing to the problem? And also I was 19. So, I wasn't as like aware of the long-term effects of some of these things that are normalized. And there's an artist part of me that, definitely thought like, well, I'm showcasing humanity, right? Like in order to have more compassion and understanding, you showcase humanity. So, I as I've gotten older, and I think especially being a mother and seeing just how out of whack things can be based on social media, which wasn't a thing at 19. When I was 19, a million years ago, that wasn't even a thing. YouTube wasn't a thing, right? Yeah. So we are being influenced in such a fast way due to social media, and it has its definite blessings, and then it also has, I think, some real negative repercussions. That is a wild west. We're in the wild, wild west of what that's doing to our culture.
Agreed. I struggle sometimes with my own participation on social media where I can look at my kids and say, this is a problem. You guys need to get off. And here's dad using it, especially my business. You've got a big, Instagram channel there. Well, let me go to the platform. That's one of the things I told you that when we first connected, that's what interested me was you as a professional in an industry, and you are using the platform to do good in my, perspective there. So on that though, and I was reading in your book, you said when you told your mom you wanted to be an actress, age 14, she asked why. And of course, what you're expecting, I mean, there's the movie scene, right? I want to be famous, right? I want to be on Broadway. And you said, because artists can be more powerful than politicians. Now, if my 14-year-old said that, I would be a little shocked. I'd be pretty flattered, actually. I think that's some righteous stuff there. Where did that come from, though, at the age of 14?
I don't know. So I had gone through
because it's what you're doing today, obviously.
I know. And so it's definitely been part of my journey. I didn't, you trace it back and you say, oh, wow, I knew at 14 that I was supposed to do this thing. And by the way, I was in Minnesota. This was prior to YouTube stars. This is like, it was unheard of to go and be in Hollywood if you weren't like in Los Angeles or didn't come from. So it's for me at 14, in the suburbs of Minnesota, never being a lead of a play, by the way, because I had such severe stage fright. Like the couple middle school plays I'd auditioned for, I never even made. Just imagine.
Which I thought was really interesting. Yeah.
In the middle school play. Like I couldn't even do that. So for me to say this, my mom driving, and I just had been going through a really rough time with bullying and just dealing with some really dark stuff and coming out of it. And my mother asking, I don't know why, I said, I want to be an actress. And she's driving. I remember, those moments that are just like crystallized in your memory. And I remember her looking in a rearview mirror, looking at me with like, huh? Like you never went in the play. and she said, why? And I said, because artists can be more powerful than politicians. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I don't know why. But then when I came out at 19 and then I start to follow and see some of the things that I was just like inspired and drawn to do, I'm like, oh, there was something bigger going on helping me be like, why am I facilitating all these groups? Why am I helping all of these artists and entrepreneurs? Why am I focused on change making while being in the entertainment industry? Why am I using my interviews not just for, saying the thing to just be more famous, right? Or date the person to get me ahead, which I had opportunities to do and I didn't. Because I wanted to have, like you said, I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to earn it. I wanted to be like respected, right? So
let me ask on that, because you do, reading about you, looking at your platforms today and what you're doing, you speak more to you come off more as a personal development, self-help person than an actress. And you speak to doing the hard work, figuring it out, more than you do speak to talent, which in your industry and anything that's going to be in the arts, that's what we tend to gravitate towards is, oh, Jim Carrey is just, he came out of the womb funny. And of course, we look at his trajectory, he may have worked at the mirror more than anybody else ever on planet Earth to hone his craft. And so is it talent or was it hard work? So again, I'm going to ask you how you look at that within your own journey, but also within the, gosh, I was going to say the arts. We'll start there because I'm going to bring the arts into everything as we talked about the other day. So start there.
Well, I think it's both, right? I think to actually be successful in an industry that is a visual medium, that is a business, right? Because show business is a business. And I think when people go in, they think, well, it's just arts. And it's like, no, if it's just arts, go do theater. Yeah. And even that has things that are political and, that you have to be good at, but really to be excellent and consistently working within the entertainment industry, you have to be both really strong left and right brain. And, or at least have somebody else that can help you if one part of you is not that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, you need to be very business minded and strategic and know how to utilize momentum and know how to utilize all this. So that's the same sort of thing that for any entrepreneur, right? So as I, naively thought I'm going to be an actress, and I was brought out at 19 and I was booking jobs, I was learning along the way. Yes, craft, of course, but it's once you get your 10,000 hours in as an actress, then you have to navigate other people and other people's craziness and egos and how to leverage what you're doing and how to do publicity and how to do all these things that are all business. So that's why that's why it's so funny. So many of the people that I actually have coached with and work with are entrepreneurs and business owners, because they need to do the thing that I have learned how to do already, which is take risks and fall and fail and do it again and you shine really bright in a project and now you got to begin again. And it's that same sort of like boxer mentality of like, I just did a fight, but now I got to start over again and I got to prove myself again.
And I want to come into risks, but I do want to ask you again, looking at your platform, because this is something that we grapple with. I have, and I know that my audience does, and a lot of people who are pursuing, aspirational people, what I'm going to say, is looking at that thing that you do as when you're looking at, okay, work at your passions, do something that's your calling, especially if you have a spiritual undergirding, or maybe even not so much, but just a bigger picture that I want to do something that I feel really called to do. That in your, and so some people we see doing that directly. Their work is their specific thing, or the work gives them the opportunity to do X, Y, Z. And we have lots of people, I make lots of money and I take it over and I build, schools in Africa or whatever. So to your craft, you're on stage, you're acting, doing this role, that role, whatever. Do you look at it as, hey, I am fulfilling my, core calling in that, or it gives me the platform to do that outside of it somewhat?
I don't think it is as like, I think some, for a lot of people, especially artists, it's like the journey unfolds while you're in it. Mm-hmm. Right. So, what it didn't begin with, I'm going to make this difference. But then once I saw the things within it and I chose to continue to stick in it, I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And I want to lead by example. And how do I use what I have to make a difference? Because I'm not a narcissist. So what are the things that I can do? And I think it's really important for people to continue to listen to their intuition as to how that evolves, right? Because it does evolve. And the wiser we get, the more we realize what could be different, what could be better, what could be healthier, especially when we see the long-term effects of these things, right? So in an industry that, like I say, breeds dysfunction, attracts dysfunction, it's not surprising that then people can become more dysfunctional. And the way to combat that, of course, is personal development.
So in talking about that, your platform and how you use it, and where you see your calling in that, where you are, it's interesting. Have there been some roles you have declined because you don't want to be associated with them? And I don't mean that from a, just a risque aspect too. I mean, I love a good movie. I love a good show or sometimes, and some of the great actors, and I see some of the roles they'll do. And I go, man, that one's so dark. It would just bother. It's not wrong, but oh my gosh, that was intense. And when you look at that, have there been some that you've declined for I'll just put it there for various reasons. Of
course. Yes. So many, so many, and I think that there can be opportunities within all of it, right? Like, again, the human experience, telling certain stories. I think that there is a beauty in owning your sensuality and your sexuality, but then there's a fine line where you're suddenly really being objectified, and it's maybe not the most helpful thing that should be put out into the world. And that's a fine line for someone, especially a young woman, because those are the people who are targeted are usually very young women, right. to be saying, or to be putting out there. There's also stuff like when I was pregnant, I was very early on pregnant, and no one knew that it was a very emotional role, and it was constantly crying, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to put my body. Your brain can't tell the difference between a thought and reality. I'm not going to put myself through this traumatic acting role and potentially like lose my baby. So like I was like, no, not doing that. Yeah. So not saying that would happen, but I just know how stress and certain techniques and how I work. It's like, I just was like, I need to be careful on how I do that. And that didn't feel right to me. And I'm going to listen to my intuition on that. But yeah, there's definitely been things along the way. And then there's been things where I'm like, I wish I would have had more guidance from representation, but they often care more about their kids' private school and their mortgage payment than they necessarily do about your well-being, mentally and whatever. So, that's the other reason, right? Like personal development. That's why I've always gone about, like when I've had people, I had someone over at SAG-AFTRA, which is the union for actors, say like, oh, we'd love you to teach an acting class. And I was like, I'm not going to teach an acting class, because what I would teach is what I have in my book. because that I think is more valuable than what you're going to learn from acting. Anyone can learn how to act. You've got to learn how to do that and do, it's like, you got to know how to do that, but then you need to know how to market yourself. And then you need to know how to rebound when you have heartache. And then you need to know how to like see movement and momentum instead of negating it before it even like starts, like all of those things. So I'm like, the acting stuff, I feel like that you just have to do by practice, and you have to be great at that. And then there's the other stuff. So you have longevity.
Okay. Well, I'm curious about that, because what you just said about being pregnant and doing a role, and you didn't want to do that because of the reality of that. I mean, part of your tagline on your website and social media is paid to pretend, which is interesting in light of what you just said, because in essence, you're saying that pretending is not benign, however. And when we have a culture right now who is, again, authenticity is such a big buzzword right now. We want to be authentic. When we go into, whether it's work, in roles or social arenas or home or whatnot, where we are pretending, where we are performing, we're not being authentic to ourselves. Mm-hmm. I'm aware that it takes a toll. I had to learn that the hard way in my own performance and my own life and feeding my self-image. And here you are saying you are professionally paid to pretend, but that it does take a role, which is something that is relevant for all of us if we're in the workplace and we're in a place where we need to perform, which to some degree, I think we all do. Yeah. But we'll just hit on that. It does take, you're saying it does take a toll regardless, even if it's fake. Right.
Well, also, the hours are crazy. The hours are long. I mean, sometimes they're shorter, but oftentimes it's 12, 14, 16 hours. Sometimes you're shooting crazy night shoots, and then you're beginning again at 4 a.m. on Monday. Shooting Friday into Saturday. It's called a fratter day. You could be like literally coming home at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning and being like, that was my Friday. And then getting up and shooting again at 4 a.m. Or getting ready to go shoot at 4 a.m. on Monday. So, just the hours are crazy and wonky. Just what that does to your circadian rhythm is wonky. But the emotional component, some people have different techniques. So they're not like diving in, they're using tear sticks, and usually their performances are pretty weak. But people that like know how to really, move people and use other types of techniques, you gotta hit on some stuff. You have to usually either hit on your own imagination work or hit on like real things that you've been through. So you're accessing stuff, and then you have to stay in that, especially like when I've done horror movies or things that were a little bit more like emotional. I've had to stay in states of things that are more extreme for hours, if not days or weeks at a time. And to say that it doesn't take a toll on me is a lie, because I know now, that I have to then usually take a break. Like I have to usually take like a week off, go to a spa, like literally get it out, get that fear or that anxiety out of my body, do through body work or just like getting present. And I think the thing that's relatable for non-actors, right? That's not a relatable thing for most people is, who you're surrounded with at work, how it affects you, their negativity, how are you coming in? And that's something that I talk about, like, that like, how do you be intentional about how you come into work and what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah.
And that's something, because most people are empathic and absorb other people's energy, and they feel that, or they feel obligated to help fix it, or they're like, God, I don't want to be around that. And it's like, how can we be more conscious of what we're putting out, whether what we're saying, which is super powerful, or just energetically, like by our vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so coming into that, I mean, you mentioned earlier risks, and that's where you and I started off talking the other day. I mean, you're a professional actress, you're in the arts, what would be categorized as the true arts, though, I feel like we all have the ability to have art in our work, no matter what that is. Now, we also have the ability to be in something that doesn't require a whole lot of us, does not require us to bring out creativity, which, as you said, you feel like everybody has at least the ability to be creative in their work. And to be creative means expressing yourself, which by proxy is risk. And there we have it. And I find so many people looking at that, and you got the benefits of putting your art out there, the benefits of expressing yourself, but then you are putting yourself on a pedestal and you are going to get, well, as you said, you're in the business also of rejection. I mean, that's a primary part of it, which you, I assume, have to make peace with as an actress. But out here in the regular world, we're in a culture right now who is just further and further away from being open to that. It must, for you, it must make an acute division, a gap in that where you're paid. I mean, you expect to be rejected for every win. There's going to be X amount of rejections. And over here in the general culture outside of acting, we don't deal with rejection. We hope to not have any at all, period.
Right. Well, when the biggest fear is public speaking.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like, you know, oh no, what are people going to think? Like, okay, maybe you bomb or you stumble on a word or whatever you know, it's other people's idea of like what is, scary is not scary to me only because I have overcome it. I've done it so many times that I have overcome that fear. And I think like what we were kind of getting at is that only by taking risk over and over and over and over again, can we then thrive, right? Can we then, it's not quite as scary. The CEO of Spanx, she did this really great, talk and was explaining that when she was young at the dinner table, her father would go around and say, how have you failed today? And so from an early age, they were encouraged to fail, not just fail on purpose, but take risk and therefore learn from the risk taking. So it's no coincidence that she was able to be bold and excel in an industry that she literally knew nothing about and is now like a billionaire. With a huge empire because she wasn't afraid of failure. So yeah, I think that to go back to what you're saying about creativity, we are all creative because if you look at children, they love to do crafts and dance and sing, and it's within us. It's whether or not we might not feel that we're, you know, going to be destined to be a professional painter, and we may give up painting, but that doesn't mean that it's not a part of our expression or can't be part of what we do as a hobby. But it also can come, and I know we spoke about this in lots of other forms, how we market, how we are creative with how we problem solve with people, how we, you know, there's an art to everything. If when we're cooking, so it's not just strategic, where there's more of a flow and allowing. And Julia Cameron's The Artist Way really dives into that. And that actually was the beginnings of what became my nonprofit. I was facilitating Artist Way groups to help myself and then my manager's clients. And this was at like 19. And then later I began what became my nonprofit that helps support socially conscious storytellers through goals, grants, and mentorship.
When you look at, as you talked about, now beyond actors and actresses, you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs. And where do you find yourself leading, guiding them in regards to that, expressing themselves? You just mentioned, I can't remember her name either, the founder of Spanx, but I mean, that brand is a personality driven brand. That's why it's there. She wasn't the first person to have some of the conceptual ideas around that clothing line, but you bought into her. Her investors bought into her, and her personality is so much a part of that. So she's expressing herself within that. And I see the best businesses overall follow that. They are attached to a personality. And I know we as in the marketplace, we find ourselves with everybody or everything being a commodity to some degree. I kind of want products and stuff that have some kind of a further meaning. Which requires some expression from the company about what they kind of the Simon Sinek thing, not just what you do. Hey, it's a computer, but the why behind it. Hey, we make computers for people that are different. You know, it was Apple's kind of thing. So that expressing yourself, I would assume you're a pretty big advocate of within business, how to help entrepreneurs express themselves through that product or service.
It depends, like, right. Like,
okay.
There's someone who's a designer and I'm like, I think you should step into being more of a personality into being, you know, she's a interior designer. I'm like, cause that's what you kind of ultimately want. Right. Yeah. So that makes sense. And then other people, not necessarily, but I think it's more about what is the driving force within you that wants to put that out there, and what is the why? And if the why is clear, if why you're wanting to put it out there is clear to your consumer or what value you're giving, right, then people are more drawn to wanting to support that.
Yeah.
Like if I know you have a higher purpose and I see that you're working really hard, I want to support you more than Joe Schmo who just cares about themselves. You know?
In that aspect of creativity and expression, where do you see the need to be self-aware? Because I'm thinking about for myself to be an artist, to get what you want out there, what you want to express, you need to be self-aware. And yet we have stories of some of the great artists who we find out are very not as well. And I literally don't, as I was thinking about you specifically in your arena of acting, I don't know how to balance that. Cause I would say you need to have some self-awareness, but we see some hard, maybe that's the point. If you're not, you see some hard stories generally.
Yeah, I think like anything, there's no hard, fast rule, right? But I do think that along the way, if we choose to continue to evolve through the difficulties of any industry, especially a really competitive industry, you're going to evolve. I've found for me, and that's kind of my special sauce, I guess, is that the more self-aware I can become, the more I can improve upon the areas that are lacking, the faster I can overcome whatever my hurdle is and get to what I want.
Yeah.
So that's always been my go-to. Also energetically, right? And that's kind of more the like woo-wee manifesting sort of ideas, but it's like energetically, like if I'm surrounded by negative people, if I'm always watching negative things, if I'm always talking about negative things, like I'm not going to necessarily take inspired action when I have opportunities because I'm surrounded by this idea that things aren't working.
Yeah.
But if I change again, it's kind of a woo-wee topic, but if I change my vibration and I'm listening to inspiring things and I'm reading about inspiring people and I'm taking, and I'm around people who are there for me for my wins and, my losses, it's not going to feel so scary to go take risk. I'm going to be more inclined to take risk.
Yeah. It's interesting with your roles. So I talked to Jordan Harbinger the other day. So if folks don't know him, he's got a podcast. He gets more downloads per episode than I do in an entire month of shows. So the guy's at a high level, and he talked about some of the things that he does before his shows just to kind of amp himself up, which that's generally the arena that we would think to go in for anything we're going to do. But there's sometimes when I found myself trying to be, it's an intense time. I need to think really deeply. So I'm not listening to the same music. I'm not listening to the same vibration or vibe as you said. And again, you're in an acute place of having to really alter your attitude, I guess, in coming into different roles. Something that I think, what a benefit for all of us as we look at the different roles. When I come into my office and I'm doing a show, I need to be at this vibration. When I sit down to write and really go down the rabbit hole, it's a different vibration. When I pull into my driveway and I'm going to come into my home, I really need to drop some of that other vibration and do
intensity. Right.
Yeah. And I don't think that I even you have me again, reading your stuff has me thinking about that more and what a skill set that is that you come into by proxy of what you do. But it's a benefit to all of us as opposed to trying to think, no, we just need to find the right vibration and be there all the time.
No. And I think that the other thing is that we have more control than we realize. Right. So one of the things that I've told people, especially if they have like a more spiritual or religious background, is like, how intentional are you before you walk in your day? Like when I was on Devious Maids, not that there was a lot of problems on Devious Maids, but you're dealing with a lot of women, you're dealing with a lot of people, you're dealing with all sorts of, you're way out of town. Like there's going to be conflict and people are tired and you're up at crazy hours. But a lot of times I would sit in my car before I would, I'd sit in my parking spot before I go in, and I'd already meditated and done all of that in the morning at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Before I would go into hair and makeup, I would often sit and say a prayer and ask for guidance to be of value. And I would bless everyone that was there. And the days that I did that, things flowed better. People were kinder. Or if someone was having a bad day, it was like kind of just that, water off a duck's back sort of thing. Like I'm not absorbing it, versus other days, if I wasn't as kind of like prepared for whatever's going to come at me, because anything can come at me, it would strike me more. I would absorb it more. Maybe I would obsess on it. And it's like suddenly that person's unresolved whatever baloney is affecting my day. And maybe it's then affecting my tone with someone else or affecting how I respond to my partner. And so it's like, those are things that we have so much more control over. And, another story, I remember being on set on a job where the director was just, it was just awful. He was yelling at people. He was yelling at the stand-in who was like, who was standing in for a child. And it was just, it was, you could just feel how like he was scared, and that was his way of trying to gain control. Yeah. Right. And so I walked in, and it was a scene between myself and a child. And I was like, this child, if she absorbs this, she's going to shut down and her performance is going to go out the window. Like, I can't have this. So this was my first day on set with these people. And I already had to put the AD in place because she had a weird tone with me at one point. I was just like, whoa, which is a weird pecking order thing. And I was like, I had to be like, yeah. No, I got it. Like, it's all good. But just, I remember being on set at this other scene later in the day, and he's irate. And I have this little kid that I'm having to work with. And I remember getting really still and literally envisioning calmness going throughout the entire set. Just like every ounce of my energy was just like, we just need to calm this down because it's crazy. And just everything just kind of dropping. And I don't know what magic happened that day, but things shifted. And so my point is that whether, whatever that was, I needed to get grounded. So I was no longer affected by it. And for some reason, he was no longer acting irate. The kid was calm. And I was like, okay, this we can deal with. Mm-hmm. And my point in telling this story is that we actually are so much more powerful than we realize. Like when we tap into spirit, when we tap into what we believe, whatever that thing is, and we just like, let's just get grounded. Let's just get present. Let's just get in purpose. Like we can really affect other people's dynamic by not being reactive. And so when you hear things like that, right, you're like, of course I would want to know personal development, right? Or if I understand character well, then I have to understand psychology well. Yeah. So there are things that we can do if we're really intentional, to shift. I couldn't leave. I couldn't be like, I can't handle, this is whatever. There was no place for me to go. I would have gotten fired.
Still got to perform.
Yeah. Still got to perform. But it did shift. And that was really eye-opening to me. Like, oh, wow, I can kind of shift things if I just get really intentional. And I think I know, because we've all been around somebody who's in a bad mood and you're just right. Like, whoa. And they don't even need to say a word.
You talk to, if we say a method or a system of success, you outline giving yourself time, allowing for time to sprint, recover, play, and rediscover. And I looked at that, and again, I'm kind of marrying that with you being in the profession of rejections. That's there's more rejections than acceptance, I guess we could say. Yeah. That in that so sprint. I think we all get sprint. That's what we go to. That's what we think we're all supposed to do there. Go out there and be, super driven and go sprint, but then recover. And I wanted to ask you about that, especially in light, Brianna, of rejection, of what do you do? Because even though you're in the business of that, I'm sure there are plenty of times where you are disappointed. You really would like to have that role. You might have even been somewhat hoping and to the level of counting on it almost. Yeah. And yet you don't get that. It is another rejection. It's hard on your spirit. And you recover, which is an area that I don't feel we give enough gravity to, even in this industry. It's quick of, hey, if you fall down, just get up, right? Brush it off. Yeah. Yeah, go. Yeah,
I think that's an issue with our culture in general, is we don't teach people how to grieve, right? Like when I lost my father at 27, I didn't have a way in which to deal with the grief. And so I did what my father's best friend, who is a mortician, said not to do, which is put your grief in your back pocket. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that we have to give moments to grieve losses, whether that's the loss of a miscarriage or the loss of a role or the loss of, whatever the job, whatever that is. We have to validate that and give ourselves space for that. And so have I been like on the floor crying and sobbing over not getting a job? Absolutely. But because I've had to deal with it so much, I'm not usually there that long. Right. Yeah. I'm like, okay, all right, let's, reframe it, but I have to feel it and let it out. and do whatever self-care I need to do in order to be like, okay, now let's move on to the next. And some of them have lingering effects, just like heartbreak, right? Some heartbreaks, you can get over quickly, and some they can really linger. And I think the fine line is when are you indulging in it and perseverating on it and making it worse for yourself, and when are you not? And I think, again, going back to our culture, in a culture that it's like, oh, you have any pain, take medicine to feel better, instead of you're supposed to be sad. This is an event that you should be sad about. Like, now, how do you have a fine line of like too much and, when you need that? I'm not saying don't be on medication if that's what people need, but I do think we're overly medicated to try and not feel anything that's not happy. And I think only in those dark spaces do we really get the most insights. It's that whole thing of like, pain pushes until vision pulls, right? So often in the pain, that's when we have our greatest insights. That's when we're like, okay, I got to make a life change. And you suddenly realize like, this job isn't working for me, and I need to be bold and, and deal. I need to have that conversation that's wrecking me inside, or whatever the thing is. Right. So, yes, I've definitely had my fair share of rejection. And I think, again, it's allowing ourselves to receive, to grieve, take care of ourselves in it. How do we contain it? How do we process it? And one of the things that I have within my guidebook is an exercise called silver linings. And, the cliche of like, well, there's always a silver lining, but there is truth to that cliche, because every obstacle can be an opportunity, but we just have to process it enough to be able to understand like, okay, this happened, but this is what I learned. And this is the silver lining of that. And if we see that in retrospect, then whatever we're dealing with in the moment that's difficult, there too will also be additional things that we're going to learn. If we just choose to know, like, okay, I might not understand it right now, but I'm going to look back and I'm going to learn something for this. For whatever reason, this is part of my soul's curriculum or life school, or whatever. These are the circumstances, the unfortunate circumstances that I've been given. One of my favorite quotes is, play the hand you were, what is it? The key to life is playing the hand you were dealt like it was the hand that you wanted.
Nice.
Nice.
The pain pushes until vision pulls. That I just pulled that up because I have not heard that yet. It feels like something that should be heard. Obviously you did that. It's credited thought leader, Dr. Michael Beckwith.
Oh yeah. Dr. Beckwith. Yeah.
Man, I have not heard that. That's a great perspective, because we know that we spend, again, in this industry, we're so often focused on, as you are even in your book, on goals, on the desires. And yet we know that most people respond more so to pain than desire. But I like that pain pushes until our vision pulls. So back on this thing of, okay, we understand sprint. You just talked about recovery. Your next one is play, which don't go too far into that one, because we're going to talk about that in the next habit show, what you do for play. But on the concept of play, again, that's not one that I would generally see in something of this nature. So how do you have that in as one of your methodologies?
Well, because what I found is that if it's not fun, you're not going to do it. Right. Yeah. So if your goal isn't fun for you on some level, there's going to be resistance, and usually you'll fail. Yeah. So, or you will begrudgingly do it, or it'll take longer. So my key component is, how do you make that goal fun? How can you go about it in a different angle so that so it feels more playful? Because if we view life as more of a game, then you're not taking everything so seriously. And then also, if you fail, right, you're like, oh, I'll just get back up and do it again. It's like, the people that almost won the World Series but didn't and lost, they're not like, well, I'm quitting baseball.
Right.
You know what I mean? And yet we do that thing. Well, if I don't get that one thing, then I can't, who cares? Who cares if you fail? You may fail a bunch of times. George Clooney, booked all sorts of pilots and none of them went. He was considered the guy who, like, your pilot's going to fail. Your TV show is going to fail if you hire him. Yeah. Because all of his shows didn't get picked up. And then one did. And then he's suddenly like huge star. And he obviously has gone beyond just doing television. But my point is like, you have to find ways to make it playful and fun, right? Whether that's meal prep, whether that's, it's like how you deal with a kid, like how do you make it more fun for them? And when I approach goals in that way, from that lens, then it's more enjoyable. And also, I also say, a handful of your goals should be fun and fulfilling. Like if you're not hitting some of your bucket list items, if you're not having beautiful experiences, if you're not prioritizing, having great experiences in your marriage or your long-term relationship, everything else will fall apart because you're going to sprint and then you're going to collapse. So if and especially like if you are married or in a long-term relationship, it can create such a huge disruption if that falls apart because you're taking your eye off it, And one of the things I say, I was saying this one of the new Hollywood group, I said, if you have one of your goals, make sure that one of them is within your marriage or a habit goal. And instead of just focusing on problems that might be in it, like also you focus on how do you create new experiences? How do you have more connection? How do you have, more bonding? And someone had said, oh, wow, that I didn't think about that. And I was like, yeah, you wouldn't be surprised if you went to the dentist and you'd stop brushing your teeth and you stop flossing. And then they're like, oh my God, you have a bunch of cavities and need to get crowns. You wouldn't be like, oh my God, how did that happen? And yet that's what so many people do in their marriages. They're like, oh yeah, it's fine. I don't really need to spend time with you. I don't need to date you. I don't need to be romantic and we don't need to keep it sexy. Like, and then they're like, what happened? How did it fall apart? It's like, of course it fell apart. You're not putting any energy into it.
That aspect of what you said, if it's not fun, you won't do it, is we just did a show and I did a survey on goals and had people, you list them all out. But and then I ask, and I'm, this is as I'm digging to myself too. What do you excite? What do those goals excite you? Actually excite you? Because somebody had talked about health and wellness. And so often we have the health and wellness goals and we're not excited about them at all, because all it means is I got to get up in the morning. I got to go run. Freaking hate running. I can't eat anything that I want. And I got to eat this rabbit food. I mean, it's just, you're not excited about it. And of course it doesn't generally stick, as opposed to what you said. I mean, I have no problem with exercise and diet because it's so stinking fun, but it made me kind of audit some of the other things. And am I having fun in them? I can be so serious. I can be so intense. Can I just not take everything so seriously, which is hard to say as a parent. I mean, it is serious, but then again, I'm not God. I have to continually come back to that one. And can I have fun? I think that's huge, honestly.
It is huge. It is huge because most people who are goal setters are type A people, right? So it's like, you know what you're doing. You know how to do a goal.
Yeah.
But the things that are what we often need to work on for those who are type A, who excel, is often not the things that are obvious, right? Like it may be like letting go of control, delegating out, being more playful, having more of a sense of humor. And how do you do that, right? But also it's forgiveness of self. It's letting go of certain things, right? It's dealing with unresolved trauma. Instead of, a lot of people who have a lot of trauma will be very exceptional in certain things, but it's often a way to avoid dealing with other things. So it's like, okay, but let's balance it out. Let's deal with those things. And that's the thing that my guidebook helps excavate, because what you see when you do it really quickly, because it's supposed to be done very quickly, is it gets you out of your head and into your heart. And what does your heart really want? And your heart may be like, you look at it and you say, oh, I need to create something. I need to create this. Or one of the women I was working with said, she's like, my thought was that should be about, my goal should be, of course, about, getting a raise at work. And she realized in doing the exercises, I need to heal. I need to put more energy into healing. And that doesn't mean she just shouldn't also focus on getting a raise, but then recognizing like, oh, this thing that seems small that I could just put to the sideline actually is huge. And if I really deal with it, I have more energy to put toward what I really want, because this is taking up an enormous amount of my time and energy.
Yeah. Well, I like the word excavate that you just used, because that is what I saw in your book. And I mean, Brianna, I probably had, I've had, this is Ziglar show, and Ziglar has their performance planner, the famous thing. It's awesome. I've had Michael Hyatt on the show. He has his focus planner. I've had John Lee Dumas. He has his something journal. I can't remember. And I looked at yours and I thought, I think it'd be a great exercise for most people. Get 3 to 5 different styles of these at the beginning of the year and go through those and find the one that fits, or find even different parts of them that fits. Because I looked through yours and I would say, I'm kind of an expert in having gone through these. And I saw things that I just hadn't considered in regards to excavating what you just said, head to heart. I mean, I think it's the very first exercise, and I'm holding it up here for the people who see the video.
Oh yeah.
Is my very short memoir. And I really appreciate that. I think because it's kind of acute to me right now. I have not done a good job of examining. It sounds bad. That sounds negative. Maybe cherishing even and uplifting the things that have happened in my past. And it was not until the work on my current book deal where they're saying, we need more of your story. And wait, what? You were a pro cyclist? You don't even talk about that. We need that in there. Yeah. And it really helped me bring things back in that was not so much even feeding my ego. It honestly showed me some things that I had stuffed and I needed to really examine why I had done that. But it did help to look at, gosh, I've done some things that it helped my confidence. It helped my self-image. So I love that. My very short memoir, who should not do that? I really thought about having my kids do that, my adult kids, at least. That's powerful. And you have a bunch of different things that kind of, even that, what I love about myself at the beginning. We don't do that. We go and do goals.
That one, see, and that's just it again. So most people go professional. Maybe they do some personal. Maybe they'll sprinkle in some habits. This I really hit on the fun, but what I realized is that a lot of the professional ones will be achieved if you deal with the things that are holding you back energetically, with your time, with your, the problems in your life. Like, deal with the fires in your life while they're campfires and not forest fires. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to see, and this helps you do that. So that you see like, oh, am I getting an A in this area or am I getting an F? And how about if instead of waiting until it's an F, I notice if it's at a C and I say, I gotta raise that up. And that's the same thing with like, oh, I'm not spending quality time with my kid, or my kid's really struggling in XYZ. It's like, okay, then I got to adjust my focus because I want to make sure that they thrive and they don't go down some bad rabbit hole. And how can I be more intentional and conscious about that? Right. Yeah. And so that's why this process, I do it annually. And even in the mid-year, you can reevaluate and shift some things. So there's not a rigidity of like, this is what you have to do, because things happen. A global pandemic happens, people die. Like, you come across having, an illness or something. And it's like, okay, what is life trying to tell me? How do I adapt? And how do I use this, to my advantage? And I really try to go about it from a multi-pronged approach is what I say. So I like to go from it physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it's like, let's go look at all that. And then let's go after it, which is very much the masculine, but then also let's let go and receive, which is more of the feminine. Right. Wow. So if you counterbalance that, and you got to know when to do it, when to do what, when to sprint and when to release and play, then things will come. Because if you're grasping everything, like a lot of people just, have that like goal setting, grasping, you're not allowing things that you're not allowing seeing it maybe coming from a different way, right? Because we're like, well, it needs to look like this. It's like, says you. Yeah. But also often the things that we want the most, if we look back in retrospect, we got something else that was so much better. And if we had gotten our prayers answered the way we thought our prayers should be answered, we would have been miserable.
Yeah. That's hard. Yeah.
So as much as we say, this is what I want, it's like, this is the feeling you want. This is the idea that you want, but let's trust that while you're going here, there's something greater than you. That's, even if it seems like a sidetrack, and as long as you're learning along the way, it will get you to what you ultimately want.
That's probably one of my most profound lessons in my own relationship with God, is trusting the vision. I've learned to do that, and yet not trust how I see that vision coming to fruition, because so seldom has it panned out. And I've had to learn that the hard way. Here's the vision. Okay, I got it, God. I'll let you know when I need you. And then a month down the road, I'm saying, where are you at, buddy? Because this isn't working out so well. Right. So that's significant. And you again, coming back to that, the beginning of the exercises in your guidebook, like the memoir, like the things that I love about myself, brought me to the fourth part of what I pulled out, sprint, recover, play, and rediscover. Yeah. And that's what it spoke to, is the ability to rediscover, rediscover who I have been and who I could be. Is that fair? And how you tell me how you're defining that, how you're perceiving that.
I think like part of the reason I have people write everything down, right? I write down their lessons, write down their blessings, write down their key moments, write down their hurdles, right? Is so that when we look back in retrospect, we're like, oh, that hurdle that I was dealing with, or that problem, right? Or that catastrophe, right? Like, let's put it in hurdle, which feels like we can just learn how to
jump over
it, right? Versus like, it's impossible. That hurdle led to this lesson. which actually turned out to be that blessing or that opportunity, right? So then you look back in retrospect and you write it all down. So you're rediscovering like, oh, this thing that I thought was a tragedy was actually a blessing. I didn't see it then, right? Like, or that situation really sucked, but I learned XYZ from it. Okay, now I can move on. And so, the rediscover is kind of like, it's like re-looking at it like you would study for a test. Since most of us do not have a photographic memory, and most of us belittle our accomplishments, like what you said, you're like, you have this amazing accomplishment that you're like, oh yeah, that happened a long time ago. It's like, no, that's a huge part of your drive and who you are, and explains so much. And like, but looking at it and re-excavating, like, oh, okay, yeah, that is a lesson. Oh, that is a pattern. Oh, this is why I keep hitting this same point. Or like, someone that's, for example, dealing with emotional eating, which is a huge thing for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, but what is the trigger? What is the chronic problem that you go to this to try and feel better? Because that's what it is. It's masking something else. Like, okay, now how about if I deal with that? Maybe you're not speaking up. Maybe you're in a toxic relationship. Maybe you're just dealing with someone who's like chronically ill and it's like overwhelming. You need to come with other tools to not like, so it helps you like look at it. And, but so rediscover is like looking at it from another point of view, learning from it. And also like saying like, oh, that thing that I thought I wanted, now that I know more, I don't really want that. I think I actually wanted a little bit more like this. So it's helping change the trajectory when you learn more.
And we spoke about this a couple of days ago. I mean, in the role that you have as a professional actress, you are put into, well, not just in the roles, but even in the culture. I mean, you have your nonprofit group called New Hollywood. You're in the Hollywood culture. I live up in a little town in the Rockies. Most people don't live in that culture. That it is an exaggerated from a persona and an ego and even the roles. It's an exaggerated area, but it feels like it affords you a different perspective on life that I see come out in your book, in your teachings, in your guidance, that exaggeration really, it just makes it makes things more blatant and easier to call out. Is that a fair perspective of where you're?
I think things are often very heightened, and I think that can be good and bad, like anything, right? Spectrum. And I think that's forced me because of most people like moving is very, very jarring. It's considered one of the top stressors. I've had to relocate for work numerous times. Mm-hmm. We're like, oh, suddenly you're like, and now I'm moving to Atlanta. Oh, okay. Let me go move, or like I'm getting ready to relocate to Berlin in 2.5 weeks, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, but because I've been put in all of these crazy circumstances through my job, and, things that would be very jarring and paralyzing for some people are not for me. Speaking in front of a bunch of people is not jarring for me. I've spoken in front of incredibly talented women at the National Women's History Museum, women of like from politics to industry to whatever. And I'm not fazed by it. And yet I used to have massive performance anxiety.
Yeah. It goes back to, your own story of trauma and bullying and even coming to the point of trying to take your life and I thought about this earlier, of that aspect of that I want to be so sensitive with, because I know people have so much to deal with, so much more than I have. And yet looking at what gives us a propensity for PTSD as opposed to post-traumatic growth. And it's easy to, again, get on a rail. Hey, it should, use that thing to strengthen you. Man, I've just known people who I look at what they've dealt with and go, I don't know that I could overcome that. And yet that is the only opportunity we have to look at is how can we use that trauma, like you've talked about, to help give us insight, to help strengthen us and help give us opportunity, that's your platform.
Yeah. But I think we all have trauma that holds us back in little ways, right? Like people talk about little trauma, the little T or the big T. And I think that, I think that it's important for people to take the time to really look at like, what are the things holding me back? I know people who've just had their heart broken a little too many times and it's too hard for them to be in something intimate again. who's just, I know other people who've been to war, and they hear something and they have, panic attacks and legit PTSD about that. So I think that we all have different things. Like we've had our heart broken, we've took a risk and we failed, and suddenly it's too scary to go and do that thing. I mean, just even writing a book, I was told by a UCLA writing extension teacher, I wasn't a good writer. And I remember being totally blocked from writing. I was like, oh, I can't write. And then I took a writing class from another woman. And when I wrote, it was all by hand. And it was very interesting. Her name is Maya Danziger of Relax and Write, she's got a really fabulous technique. And I remember writing. And when we had to read what we wrote, my handwriting was so sloppy that I remember noticing it. I'd be like, oh, look at that resistance. Right? Like it was a physical manifestation of resistance. And so I paid attention to it and I was like, okay, next time I have to not do that. And I slowly worked through it. And then suddenly I was writing this story and, and I'd written this, I then started to write scripts and then I started to, write my guidebook. And so it was like, I could have taken that comment that at the time wrecked me and never written again. And yet I had this story that I needed to say. I had a whole book I had to write,
Thank you for writing this book and for offering it. No, really, I think I appreciate, again, you using the platform that you've got to, as your book says, rise higher, shine brighter, and give back. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for taking the time here. Excited to know you and what you're doing. And thanks for giving us the time today here on the show, Brianna.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. That again is Brianna Brown Keen. If you look her up in the IMDb database, it's Brianna Brown. That's her actress name. And again, she's in a ton of shows and movies and whatnot. But right now, she's actually featured right now in the new Outer Banks season 4. But her podcast, Manifesting Your Mission. You can type that into your podcast platform right now, and you'll see one of maybe the most recent show or the first of the most recent shows. She has me on there to talk about Drive. Really appreciate her doing that. Got a comment or question about what we talked about here for myself or Brianna? Let me know. kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Hey, until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.